Something brought you here. You may call it coincidence. You may call it a recommendation, an algorithm, or a moment of idle curiosity that led you to press play. But consider the possibility that none of those explanations are the full story. Consider the possibility that a part of you, the deeper part that operates below thought, below habit, below the carefully constructed story you tell yourself about who you are and what you are capable of, has been quietly preparing for exactly this moment. Books, teachers, and revelations do not arrive randomly in a life. They arrive when something in us has finally grown ready to receive them. The question is not whether you are ready. You are here, and that is the only evidence required. The question is what you are ready for, and what this specific encounter, this specific collection of ideas, at this specific moment in your specific life, is genuinely here to awaken in you. Every chapter ahead explores a different dimension of the awakening that is already in motion within you. You will learn how the subconscious mind has been quietly building your current reality. You will understand the connection between your inner world and the outer life you experience. You will discover the specific practices through which genuine transformation occurs, and you will encounter the timeless wisdom that has guided seekers across every culture and every century toward the life their deepest nature has always known was possible. If you are enjoying this audiobook and want to reconnect with the wisdom, power, and purpose that have always lived within you, subscribe to this channel now. More chapters are coming, and each one will guide you deeper into the truth of who you really are and what you are truly here to create. Chapter 1. The moment before. Everything changes. There is always a moment before the change. It does not look dramatic. It rarely announces itself with any fanfare. It might look like a quiet afternoon when a restlessness you cannot name finally becomes too loud to ignore. It might look like the morning you wake up and realize that the life you have been living has been built from someone else's expectations. It might look like this specific moment in which something in you leaned toward a particular audiobook without fully understanding why, and found itself here in the middle of an ordinary day that is about to become the beginning of something genuinely different. The moments before genuine transformation are ordinary. That is precisely what makes them so easy to miss. The person who understands this does not wait for dramatic external signals that the time for change has arrived. They recognize the quiet internal signal, the readiness beneath the restlessness, and they lean into it. The ancient philosophical traditions that form the bedrock of this audiobook's wisdom did not speak of transformation as a sudden event delivered from the outside. They spoke of it as a remembering, a gradual returning to something that was always true about the person doing the work. The Vedic tradition described this as the return to the Atman, the true self beneath the accumulated layers of conditioning. The Hermetic tradition described it as the recognition of the divine within the human, the understanding that the searching and the sought are not as separate as ordinary consciousness suggests. Plato described the process of genuine learning as anamnesis, which means not the acquisition of new knowledge, but the recollection of knowledge the soul already carries. These traditions, emerging independently across thousands of miles and thousands of years, converged on the same essential understanding: that what you are searching for is not somewhere out there waiting to be found. It is within you, waiting to be remembered. The subconscious mind, which processes approximately 11 million bits of information per second compared to the roughly 40 bits per second of the conscious mind, has been working on your behalf since before you were born. It has been storing every experience, every word spoken to you, every emotional impression, every interpretation drawn from every circumstance you have ever encountered. From that vast accumulated database, it continuously generates the beliefs, expectations, and inner narratives that then shape what you notice in the world, how you interpret what you notice, and what behaviors arise from those interpretations. Most people live entirely within this automated system, without ever recognizing it as a system. They experience its outputs as simply reality, as the obvious and inevitable truth of their lives, rather than as a specific and revisable program running on specific and revisable instructions. The specific reason this book found you at this moment in your life has everything to do with what your subconscious has been quietly processing beneath the surface of ordinary awareness. Genuine readiness is not a conscious decision. It is the outcome of a long subterranean preparation, a gradual ripening of something that eventually breaks the surface of ordinary awareness in the form of an unexpected interest, an unexplained pull toward a specific kind of idea, or a quality of openness that was not there before. You may not have consciously decided to be ready for what this audiobook offers, but the fact that you are here, genuinely present to these words, suggests that something in you made that decision at a level you were not consciously supervising. That is not coincidence. That is the deeper intelligence of the inner life, operating as it always has. The concept of the divine spark, which gives its name to the content this audiobook explores, appears in virtually every wisdom tradition that has ever grappled seriously with the question of human nature and human potential. In Gnosticism, the divine spark was the pneuma, the fragment of divine light trapped in material form and longing to return to its source. In Jewish mysticism, it was the nitzotz, the divine light present within every person, regardless of their behavior or belief. In the Sufi tradition, it was the sur, the innermost secret of the heart, where the divine and the human touch. In contemporary neuroscience and consciousness research, the concept appears in different language but recognizable form. As the studies of peak experience, flow states, and transcendent consciousness that consistently reveal a dimension of human awareness that exceeds the ordinary contracted self and its habitual limitations. The spark is real, and it is in you. What separates the people who discover and develop this inner spark from the people who carry it all their lives without ever fully accessing it is not intelligence, not opportunity, not circumstance, and not fortune. It is awareness, the specific quality of honest, curious, non-defensive self-awareness that makes it possible to see the programs that have been running, to recognize them as programs rather than as fixed facts about reality, and to begin the specific work of genuine revision that this audiobook describes. Awareness is the beginning of everything, and awareness begins in exactly the kind of moment you are having right now. A moment of genuine presence, genuine openness, and the specific quality of inner quiet that makes it possible to hear something that the noise of ordinary daily life has been drowning out. The chapters ahead will take each dimension of this inner awakening and develop it with both the depth it deserves and the practical specificity that makes wisdom genuinely useful rather than simply inspiring. The chapter on the subconscious will describe precisely how your inner architecture was built and how it can be genuinely rebuilt. The chapters on consciousness, vibration, and the law of correspondence will show how the inner world and the outer world maintain their consistent relationship. The chapters on visualization, identity, and intentional living will give you the specific practices through which genuine transformation becomes not just possible, but practically daily. And the final chapters will address what the fully lived version of this awakening looks like in an ordinary life that has become genuinely extraordinary from the inside out. Right now, in this moment, before you have done anything differently, before you have applied a single practice or revised a single belief, something has already changed. You have arrived at the beginning of a genuine inquiry into your own nature and your own potential, with enough genuine openness to sit with these ideas rather than dismissing them. That arrival is not a small thing. Most people never make it. Most people stay in the familiar territory of their existing programs, their existing explanations for why their life is what it is and what they can realistically hope for from it. You are not doing that right now. Right now, you are doing something genuinely different. And in the specific tradition this audiobook draws from, the recognition of the beginning is itself the beginning of the genuine work. Chapter 2. The Inner Architecture. Nobody told you about you were handed a life without a manual, not through anyone's negligence or malice, but simply because the people who handed it to you were themselves operating without one. The parents and teachers and cultural institutions that shaped your earliest understanding of yourself and the world were passing on the maps they had been given, which were themselves copies of older maps, stretching back through generations of people who navigated their lives without ever examining the territory the maps were describing. This is the specific inheritance every human being receives, a set of deep, largely invisible operating instructions assembled from other people's experiences, other people's fears, other people's limitations, and other people's understanding of what is and is not possible for a person like you. The inheritance is not malicious. It is simply automatic, and it runs your life with a completeness and a consistency that most people never recognize until something disrupts the automatic and forces a genuine look at what has actually been in charge. The disruption that leads people to genuine inner inquiry takes many forms. Sometimes it is loss. The relationship ends, the career collapses, the health crisis arrives, and the life that seemed solid reveals itself as having been built on foundations that were never examined. Sometimes it is success. The achievement is reached, the goal accomplished, the life arrives at the place it was aimed for, and the specific emptiness of having gotten what you thought you wanted turns out to be more disorienting than the striving that preceded it. Sometimes it is neither loss nor success, but simply a growing awareness, a quiet accumulation of evidence that the life being lived does not correspond to some deeper sense of what the life was supposed to be. Whatever form the disruption takes, its function is the same. It breaks the automatic quality of the unexamined life and creates a space in which genuine looking becomes possible. The inner architecture this chapter describes is not a metaphor. It is a specific description of how the human brain and the human subconscious actually function in generating the quality of moment-to-moment experience that constitutes a life. The neurological research of the past several decades has established with considerable precision that the brain does not passively receive experience and then respond to it. The brain actively generates predictions about what is about to be experienced based on everything it has previously experienced, and then uses incoming sensory data primarily to update and correct those predictions. What we experience as seeing the world is actually the brain's internal model of the world, built from expectation as much as from sensation. This means that the architecture of expectation, which the subconscious builds from all accumulated experience, is continuously shaping what we perceive as available in the world around us. The specific expectations most consequential for the quality of a human life are the deepest ones, the ones that operate as background assumptions rather than as consciously held beliefs. These background assumptions were installed primarily during the developmental window, from birth to approximately age 7, when the brain operates predominantly in the slower brainwave states of theta and delta that allow direct subconscious absorption of incoming information without the filtering of critical evaluation. The child in this developmental window does not assess whether the messages being received are accurate, helpful, or genuinely applicable to their actual nature. The child simply absorbs. And what is absorbed with enough repetition and enough emotional intensity becomes the foundational program from which the adult's entire system of expectation is built. Understanding that the foundational program was assembled during a period of unavoidable vulnerability changes the relationship to that program in a specific and liberating way. The program is not you. It was given to you before you had the capacity to choose what to receive. The person who genuinely absorbs this distinction stops experiencing their limitations as fixed facts about their nature and starts experiencing them as inherited constructions that are available for genuine revision. This is not a small shift. It is the specific shift from which every other genuine transformation follows. You cannot deliberately revise what you experience as fixed reality. You can deliberately revise what you recognize as an adopted construction. The architecture of your inner life was built, and what was built by one set of inputs can be rebuilt by a different, deliberately chosen set. The specific mechanisms through which the inner architecture shapes outer experience operate simultaneously through several channels. The perceptual channel is the most immediate. The subconscious programs calibrate what is called the reticular activating system, the neural filter that determines which fraction of the available sensory information reaches conscious awareness. The person whose inner architecture includes the deep expectation of financial scarcity has a reticular activating system, calibrated to deliver financial scarcity evidence to conscious attention, while filtering financial opportunity evidence before it reaches deliberate awareness. The behavioral channel is the second. The inner architecture continuously shapes the automatic behavioral choices through which the person engages with the world, generating the specific patterns of action and response that produce the specific patterns of outcome, that then confirm the expectations from which the behaviors arose. The third channel, through which inner architecture shapes outer experience, is the interpersonal broadcast, which the HeartMath Institute's extensive research on the heart's electromagnetic field has documented with particular precision. The heart generates an electromagnetic field extending approximately 5 to 10 feet beyond the physical body, and the specific pattern of that field changes measurably with different emotional states. Other people's nervous systems detect and respond to these field patterns below the threshold of conscious awareness, adjusting their behavior, their openness, and their interpretations of the broadcasting person's words and actions in ways that correspond to the emotional pattern of the broadcast, rather than to any deliberate behavioral signal. The inner architecture, through its governance, of the dominant emotional state is continuously shaping the quality of social response received from every person encountered, and through that social response, the specific quality of opportunity, connection, and circumstance that the life contains. The divine spark within you has always been present, beneath the accumulated layers of the inner architecture described in this chapter. The architecture did not create you. It covered you, partially and temporarily, with the specific constructions of an environment you did not choose. The work of this audiobook is the work of genuine uncovering, of removing the specific constructions that are not genuinely yours, and allowing what has always been genuinely yours to express itself with increasing clarity, increasing confidence, and increasing creative power in the specific life you are here to live. This work does not require the dramatic destruction of everything previously built. It requires the patient, consistent, skillfully applied process of examining what is there, recognizing what genuinely serves and what genuinely limits, and deliberately, compassionately, persistently introducing the new architecture that corresponds to the genuine nature waiting beneath the inherited one. Chapter 3. Consciousness is not what you think it is. Most people, when they use the word consciousness, mean something like wakefulness, the general state of being awake and aware, as opposed to being asleep or unconscious. This understanding captures something real, but misses the most important thing. Consciousness, in the deeper sense that the traditions this audiobook draws from have always meant, is not simply the state of being awake. It is the very ground of experience itself, the specific presence in which all experience arises, the awareness that is aware of being aware. This distinction, which sounds abstract when stated plainly, has enormous practical consequences for how a person understands themselves, their relationship to their circumstances, and the specific nature of their capacity to change both. The difference between understanding consciousness as a byproduct of brain activity and understanding it as the ground of experience is the difference between living as a mechanism subject to the laws governing all mechanisms and living as an aware being with genuine creative relationship to the reality being experienced. The quantum physics discovered in the early 20th century and refined across the century since has generated findings that point persistently, despite the discomfort of many physicists, in the direction of consciousness playing a fundamental role in the nature of physical reality. The measurement problem, the documented fact that quantum systems exist in indeterminate states until the act of observation collapses them into specific, definite states, has never been satisfactorily resolved by interpretations that treat consciousness as entirely passive and entirely separate from the physical systems being observed. John Wheeler, one of the most eminent physicists of the 20th century, spent the latter decades of his career developing what he called the participatory universe, a framework in which the observer is not a passive witness to a pre-existing reality, but an active participant in bringing that reality into specific form through the act of observation. The universe, in Wheeler's framework, is not a machine indifferent to the minds it contains. It is in some fundamental sense a participatory project. The Hermetic principle of mentalism, which states that the universe is mental in its fundamental nature, is the ancient articulation of the understanding that quantum physics has been approaching from the scientific direction. The Hermetic tradition did not mean that physical reality is a hallucination or that matter does not exist. It meant that the substance of reality is more fundamentally mind-like than matter-like, that consciousness is more primary than the physical forms through which it expresses itself, and that the human mind, as an expression of this fundamental mentality, participates in the ongoing creation of experienced reality rather than merely receiving it. This was the specific understanding preserved across the mystery schools of ancient Egypt and Greece, encoded in the philosophical systems of Plato and the Neoplatonists, and transmitted in various forms through every contemplative tradition that has taken seriously the question of what consciousness actually is. The practical significance of understanding consciousness as the ground of experience rather than as a byproduct of brain activity shows up most directly in the specific question of agency. The person who understands consciousness as a byproduct of brain activity experiences themselves as fundamentally subject to the physical and chemical processes governing their brain, which are, in turn, subject to the genetic inheritance and environmental history that shaped those processes. From this understanding, the space available for genuine self-determination is narrow. The person who understands consciousness as the ground of experience, who recognizes that the awareness present in this very moment is not reducible to any physical process because it is the very space in which all physical processes are experienced, has access to a qualitatively different relationship to their own life and its possibilities. Expanded states of consciousness, documented across the research literature on peak experiences, flow states, near-death experiences, meditation, and plant medicine ceremonies, consistently reveal a quality of awareness that exceeds the ordinary contracted consciousness of daily life in specific and recognizable ways. The sense of self expands beyond the ordinary boundary of the individual body and its concerns. The quality of perception becomes more vivid and more inclusive. The sense of separation between self and world diminishes, sometimes dramatically, and a quality of knowing arises that feels more direct and more certain than ordinary conceptual knowledge, as if the usual intermediaries between the aware being and the truth of what is have temporarily dissolved. These states, whether they arise through formal contemplative practice or through the specific disruptions that sometimes crack the ordinary self open without invitation, consistently point toward the same understanding. That ordinary contracted consciousness is not the whole of what you are. The divine spark within you is, at its most fundamental level, your consciousness itself. Not the specific content of consciousness, the thoughts and memories and emotions and sensations that arise and pass within it. The consciousness itself, the awareness that is aware of all that content without being reducible to any of it. This awareness is what the Vedic tradition called Atman, what the Christian mystics called the ground of the soul, what the Zen tradition pointed toward with the question, what was your face before your parents were born? It has always been present. It has been present through every experience you have ever had. through every phase of your life, through every construction and revision of the personality that thought of itself as you. It is the constant that all the changing content appears within, and recognizing it directly as your own deepest nature, rather than as a philosophical abstraction, is the specific recognition that every genuine awakening eventually arrives at. The practical doorway to this recognition is not reserved for advanced meditators or spiritual virtuosos. It is available in every moment through the specific practice of genuine present moment awareness, the deliberate shifting of attention from the content of experience to the awareness of that content. When you are aware of a thought, what is it that is aware? When you notice an emotion, what is it that is noticing? When you observe the inner critic speaking, what is observing the critic? This quality of turning awareness back on itself, of recognizing the witnessing presence that underlies all witnessed content, is the beginning of the direct recognition of what you actually are, beneath the accumulated constructions of the inner architecture. It does not require leaving daily life. It requires a different quality of presence within it. Consciousness, recognized as the ground of your experience rather than as a byproduct of your brain, changes everything about how you relate to the possibility of genuine change. The brain can be changed. The subconscious programs can be revised. The inner architecture can be rebuilt. And the aware presence that is your deepest nature does not need to be created or earned or discovered through great spiritual effort. It needs only to be recognized. It is here right now, reading these words, aware of the reading, aware of the awareness itself, if you look in that direction. That recognition, however brief and however partial, in this initial moment, is the specific spark this chapter exists to illuminate. Chapter 4. The Law of Correspondence and Your Daily Life. As above, so below, as within, so without. This phrase, preserved from the Hermetic tradition in the text known as the Emerald Tablet and attributed to the legendary Hermes Trismegistus, is perhaps the most practically consequential single sentence in the entire history of metaphysical philosophy. It describes the specific relationship between the inner world and the outer world that, once genuinely understood, transforms the entire orientation toward change. Most people, most of the time, attempt to change their outer circumstances directly, changing the job, changing the relationship, changing the city, changing the strategy, hoping that the changed outer circumstance will produce a changed inner experience. The law of correspondence says the direction of genuine change runs the other way. The inner world and the outer world correspond with a consistency and a faithfulness that makes permanent outer change impossible without prior or simultaneous inner change, because the outer world is continuously being organized around the inner one. The law of correspondence is not a mystical claim requiring faith in supernatural mechanisms. It is a description of the specific, observable, scientifically documentable relationship between the quality of a person's inner world and the quality of their outer experience, operating through the mechanisms described in earlier chapters: perceptual filtering, behavioral expression, interpersonal broadcast, and the specific long-term decisions and investments that gradually build the life environment corresponding to the dominant inner program. These mechanisms are always active. They do not take days off. They do not respect the person's conscious preference for a different outcome. They simply generate outer experience that corresponds to inner reality with the reliability of any other natural law. The specific way the law of correspondence shows up in financial life is worth examining in detail because it is the domain where people most urgently want outer change and where the inner to outer sequence is most consistently misunderstood. The person who has a deep subconscious program of financial scarcity, installed through years of early observation of how financial life works for people like them, will find that financial improvement achieved through outer strategy alone tends to be temporary. The income rises, and the spending rises to match it. The savings accumulate, and the unexpected expense appears. The new opportunity materializes, and the specific self-sabotaging behavior arises at exactly the threshold where the familiar financial level would be exceeded. These are not random events. They are the law of correspondence operating faithfully, continuously generating outer financial experience that corresponds to the inner financial program, regardless of what outer strategies are being applied on top of the unchanged inner architecture. The relational dimension of the law of correspondence is equally specific and equally consistent. The specific quality of relationship a person consistently experiences across different partners and different social contexts and different years corresponds with remarkable precision to the specific inner relational program assembled during the developmental period. The person who carries a deep subconscious expectation of emotional unavailability will consistently attract emotionally unavailable partners, not through any mystical force of attraction, but through the specific combination of perceptual filtering that notices emotionally unavailable qualities as normal and filters out emotionally available qualities as suspicious behavioral patterns that communicate the relational expectations through countless unconscious signals that emotionally unavailable partners respond to with familiarity, and the specific electromagnetic broadcast of the inner relational state that other people's nervous systems read and match without any deliberate coordination. The professional dimension of the law of correspondence shows up in what might be called the career ceiling, the specific level of professional achievement that a person consistently reaches and then inexplicably fails to surpass, regardless of their objective capability and regardless of the specific strategies applied to breaking through. The ceiling corresponds to the specific inner program about what level of recognition, responsibility, and compensation is appropriate for someone of this particular identity. When professional achievement approaches the ceiling specified by the inner program, the specific behaviors, decisions, and interpretations arise that restore the familiar level because the subconscious is always working to maintain correspondence between inner and outer. And the inner program specifies a ceiling that the outer behavior then reliably reproduces. Working deliberately with the law of correspondence means working primarily on the inner world and allowing the outer world to reorganize accordingly, rather than primarily working on the outer world and hoping the inner world will follow. This is the specific inversion that every genuine wisdom tradition has identified as the key to genuine, lasting change, and it is the inversion that this audiobook exists to make as clear and as practically accessible as possible. The inner work required is the work of genuine subconscious program revision, identifying the specific programs currently governing the relevant domains of life, understanding where they came from and what maintains them, and consistently introducing new programming through the specific mechanisms that actually reach the subconscious layer where the programs operate. The most encouraging dimension of the law of correspondence, once it is genuinely understood, is that it operates in both directions with equal faithfulness. The same law that generates outer scarcity from inner scarcity programs generates outer abundance from inner abundance programs. The same mechanism that produces outer relational difficulty from inner relational fear programs produces outer relational nourishment from inner relational security programs. The law does not favor limitation. It simply reflects. And the reflection can be as beautiful and as expansive as the inner reality it is reflecting. The work of this audiobook is the work of building an inner reality worth reflecting, one genuine revision at a time across the patient and consistent daily practice described in the chapters ahead. The law of correspondence is not a burden. It is the most hopeful thing possible about the nature of reality. It means your outer life is not random. It is not cruel. It is not organized against you by forces beyond your influence. It is a faithful reflection of something accessible, revisable, and genuinely within your creative reach. The reflection can change because the reflector can change. And the reflector, the inner world from which your outer life continuously emerges, is exactly what this audiobook exists to help you understand and deliberately, compassionately, skillfully transform. Chapter 5. The subconscious knows what you have been telling it. The subconscious mind is the most faithful listener you will ever have. It does not judge the content of what it receives. It does not evaluate whether the incoming message serves your genuine well-being or undermines it. It does not distinguish between the message you intend to send and the message you actually send through the combined quality of your words, your emotions, and your habitual patterns of thought. It simply receives everything that is consistently delivered to it with genuine emotional engagement, and it organizes the entire operating system of your biology, your perception, your behavior, and your social broadcast around making the received content real. This makes the subconscious simultaneously the most powerful ally available for genuine inner development and the most important factor to understand in any serious attempt to change the trajectory of a life. The content the subconscious has been receiving across your life comes from multiple simultaneous sources, most of which have been operating without your conscious awareness or deliberate direction. The inner monologue, the continuous stream of self-talk that narrates your experience from morning to night, is delivering programming content with every habitual phrase it uses about you and your life. The habitual emotional states you occupy across ordinary days are delivering programming content through the specific physiological signatures they generate, which the subconscious reads as instructions for what kind of biological and experiential environment to maintain. The beliefs you hold without examining, the ones that feel like simple, obvious facts about reality rather than like adopted positions, are delivering programming content through the specific perceptual and behavioral choices they generate. All of this has been arriving at the subconscious consistently and emotionally authentically, and the subconscious has been faithfully building a life that corresponds to it. The emotional dimension of subconscious reception is the most consequential and the most consistently misunderstood. The subconscious does not primarily respond to the semantic content of words or thoughts. It responds to the emotional charge accompanying that content, using emotional intensity, as its primary signal for determining what deserves genuine encoding as important programming. This is why the casual self-deprecating comment made repeatedly with genuine, if mild, embarrassment programs the subconscious more effectively than the deliberate positive affirmation delivered with the flat tone of performed conviction. The embarrassment is genuine. The performed conviction is not. And the subconscious, which is extraordinarily good at detecting the difference, programs from the genuine rather than from the performed. This understanding has an immediate practical implication that transforms the approach to deliberate inner work. The goal is not to say the right words or think the right thoughts. The goal is to genuinely feel at the level of actual bodily experience rather than cognitive performance, the emotional reality of the desired state. The subconscious that receives the genuine felt experience of genuine confidence, however briefly and however imperfectly accessed in a deliberate practice session, receives something that has real programming impact. The same subconscious that receives a recited confident-sounding statement with no felt connection to what confidence actually feels like in the body receives something that has almost no programming impact. The path to genuine subconscious change runs through genuine emotional embodiment, not through cognitive performance. The morning and evening transitions between sleep and waking are the specific daily windows in which the subconscious is most directly accessible for deliberate new programming. Because during these transitions, the brain passes through the theta brainwave state associated with maximum subconscious receptivity. In the theta state, the critical analytical faculty of the ordinary waking mind is partially suspended, and new content delivered with genuine emotional engagement reaches the subconscious with the same directness that the original developmental programming achieved. Using these windows deliberately with specific chosen content held with genuine felt quality is the highest leverage daily investment available for any person committed to genuine subconscious revision. Even 10 to 15 minutes of genuinely engaged, deliberate inner work during these windows produces more lasting subconscious impression than hours of the same content introduced during the analytically active hours of ordinary waking consciousness. The relationship between the subconscious and the spoken word, which Florence Scovel-Shinn explored with particular depth and practical specificity in her teachings from the early 20th century, is one of the most accessible entry points for beginning genuine subconscious reprogramming work. Words spoken habitually, whether internally in the inner monologue or externally in conversation, carry the specific emotional authenticity of habit, which gives them genuine subconscious programming weight. The habitual phrase that describes your financial situation in the language of chronic insufficiency is delivering genuine financial programming to the subconscious every time it is spoken with genuine felt quality. The deliberately chosen phrase that describes your financial situation in the language of genuine movement toward ease and abundance delivers genuine new financial programming when it is spoken with the same genuine felt quality. The content of the habitual language and the content of the deliberate language are different. The mechanism through which both reach the subconscious is identical. Recognizing what the subconscious has been receiving across your life is the specific diagnostic work that makes deliberate revision genuinely possible rather than blindly applied. The most direct way to understand what the subconscious has been receiving is to look honestly at what your life has been consistently producing, because the outer life is the faithful reflection of the inner programming, as described in the previous chapter on the law of correspondence. The financial patterns that recur across different strategies and different years reflect the financial programming. The relational dynamics that recur across different partners and different contexts reflect the relational programming. The professional ceilings that recur across different fields and different attempts reflect the identity programming. These are not reports on fixed external reality. They are diagnostic information about the current inner program. And diagnostic information, honestly received, is the beginning of the specific revision that changes what the subconscious delivers to experience going forward. The subconscious is not your adversary. It has been doing exactly what it was designed to do, maintaining the consistency of the self and the life around the specific inputs it has received. When you begin delivering genuinely different inputs consistently and with genuine emotional engagement across the genuine time that deep program revision requires, the subconscious will begin doing exactly what it has always done with the inputs it receives, building a life that corresponds. The faithful listener that has been building from inherited limiting programs can build just as faithfully from deliberately chosen expansive ones. The mechanism does not change. What changes is the quality and direction of what you consciously choose to feed it. Chapter 6. Vibration, frequency, and the field you live in. You are not simply an observer of the world you inhabit. You are a broadcaster within it, continuously transmitting a specific signal through the electromagnetic field your body generates, the behavioral patterns your inner state produces, and the perceptual lens through which you interpret every incoming experience. This signal is not metaphorical. The heart generates an electromagnetic field measurable several feet beyond the body, and research has established that this field carries specific information about the dominant emotional state of the person generating it. Other people's nervous systems receive this information and respond to it below the threshold of conscious awareness, adjusting their behavior in ways that correspond to the received signal before any deliberate social communication has occurred. You are always broadcasting. The only question is what frequency your broadcast is carrying. The Hermetic principle of vibration, which states that everything in existence vibrates at specific rates corresponding to specific qualities of experience, is the ancient articulation of what contemporary physics describes through the language of wave functions, frequency, and resonance. At the quantum level, what appears as solid matter is patterns of vibrating energy. At the biological level, what appears as the stable physical body is a continuous dynamic process of electromagnetic and biochemical activity, vibrating at specific rates. At the psychological level, what appears as the stable emotional tone of a person's daily experience is the specific vibrational quality of their dominant inner state, which corresponds to specific physiological conditions, specific electromagnetic patterns, and specific qualities of outer experience, attracted through the resonance described by the law of correspondence. Different emotional states correspond to measurably different vibrational qualities, and the Heart Math Institute's research on heart rate variability provides the most precisely documented scientific account of this correspondence. Heart rate variability. the specific pattern of variation in timing between heartbeats changes measurably and distinctly with different emotional states. States of genuine appreciation, genuine compassion, and genuine care produce what researchers call coherent heart rate variability patterns, characterized by smooth, organized oscillations. States of anxiety, frustration, and chronic negative experience produce incoherent patterns, characterized by erratic, disorganized oscillation. The coherent patterns are associated with measurably improved immune function, measurably improved cognitive performance, measurably improved emotional regulation, and the specific quality of interpersonal presence that generates more open and more generous responses from other people's nervous systems. The incoherent patterns are associated with the opposite of all of these. The practical significance of the vibrational dimension of human experience is that cultivating genuinely high-quality emotional states is not simply a matter of personal well-being without external consequence. The quality of the dominant emotional state determines the quality of the electromagnetic broadcast, which shapes the quality of every interpersonal encounter, which shapes the quality of every professional opportunity, which shapes the quality of every relational experience that enters the life. This chain of consequence means that the inner work of cultivating genuine positive emotional states is not separate from practical engagement with the outer world. It is the most direct available form of engagement with the specific mechanism through which the outer world is continuously being shaped by the inner one. The specific practice of deliberately cultivating heart coherence, developed by the HeartMath Institute and extensively documented across their research literature, involves a specific combination of breathing rhythm and focused inner attention that produces measurable shifts in heart rate variability within minutes. The practice begins with slowing and deepening the breath to approximately 5 breaths per minute, breathing primarily from the belly rather than the chest. During this slowed breathing, the attention is focused deliberately in the area of the heart, and from within that heart-focused attention, a genuine positive emotional state is deliberately activated, beginning with something small and genuinely appreciated in the current experience. Even a minor, genuine appreciation, held with real felt quality rather than cognitive performance, begins to shift the heart's electromagnetic pattern toward coherence. Regular practice builds this shift into a more stable baseline, gradually changing the dominant vibrational quality of the person's daily inner state and therefore of their ongoing outer experience. The concept of frequency alignment, used across the manifestation and law of attraction literature, describes the specific condition in which the vibrational quality of the person's dominant inner state corresponds to the vibrational quality of the outcomes and experiences they most desire. The misalignment between these two vibrations is the specific mechanism through which the desired outcomes remain persistently just out of reach, despite genuine desire and genuine effort. The person who genuinely desires financial abundance, while their dominant inner state carries the vibrational quality of chronic financial anxiety, is broadcasting the frequency of the anxiety rather than the frequency of the abundance. The desired outcome and the broadcast frequency do not correspond, and the law of correspondence faithfully reflects what is being broadcast rather than what is being consciously desired. Achieving genuine frequency alignment requires the specific inner work of revising the dominant emotional state from the anxious, contracted frequencies of scarcity, fear, and chronic insufficiency toward the coherent, open frequencies of genuine appreciation, genuine confidence, and genuine creative engagement. This revision is not accomplished through the performance of positivity or the suppression of genuine negative feeling. It is accomplished through the patient, consistent cultivation of genuine high-quality emotional states through the practices described across this audiobook. The heart coherence practice, the deliberate cultivation of genuine gratitude, the consistent revision of the inner narrative toward more generative language, and the specific practice of genuinely inhabiting the desired state in the imagination with sufficient felt quality to generate real subconscious impression. The field you live in, the specific quality of electromagnetic, social, and experiential environment that surrounds you at every moment, is continuously being shaped by the signal you are broadcasting into it. This is not a burden. It is the most hopeful possible description of the nature of your situation. It means the field can change, because the broadcaster can change. And changing the broadcaster, which is the specific work of genuine inner development, is entirely within the reach of anyone willing to do it with the patient consistency and the genuine emotional honesty that genuine inner development actually requires. The divine spark within you is not a low-frequency thing. It is the highest available frequency expressing itself through a human life that is gradually, through genuine work, becoming more capable of conducting it. Chapter 7. Your self-concept is the blueprint of your life. Before any architect breaks ground on a building, the building exists as a blueprint. The blueprint specifies what the building will contain, how high it will rise, where the load-bearing walls will stand, and what can be built in which spaces. No amount of effort applied during construction can produce a building that exceeds the specifications of the blueprint. Workers can be more diligent, materials can be more expensive, tools can be more sophisticated, but the building that emerges will correspond to the blueprint rather than to the quality of effort that went into constructing it. The self-concept functions as the blueprint of a human life in exactly this sense. It specifies, below the level of conscious awareness, what level of financial experience is appropriate for someone of this identity. What quality of love is available to someone with this history? What ceiling of professional recognition corresponds to someone of this particular combination of qualities and limitations? No amount of outer effort applied above this blueprint produces lasting results, because the subconscious is always working to maintain the correspondence between outer experience and the inner specification. Nathaniel Branden's decades of research and clinical work on self-esteem established the specific relationship between the quality of the self-concept and the quality of the life lived from it with unusual empirical precision. His research found that self-esteem, understood not as narcissism or self-promotion, but as the genuine, stable conviction of one's own worth and competence, predicts life outcomes across virtually every significant domain with greater consistency than any other single psychological variable studied. The person with genuine, stable self-esteem approaches financial opportunity with a qualitatively different inner posture than the same person with chronic self-doubt. The person with genuine, stable self-esteem engages with relational vulnerability with a qualitatively different quality of openness. They pursue professional ambition with a qualitatively different confidence, same capability, different blueprint, different life. The self-concept was assembled from the same developmental material described in earlier chapters. The accumulated messages of the early environment about what kind of person this child was and what they could realistically expect from the world. Some of these messages were explicit and verbal. You are so smart. You are so difficult. You are not as talented as your sister. People like us do not live that way. Others were implicit and behavioral. The quality of attention received, the emotional responses generated by different kinds of behavior, the specific standards of the household about what level of aspiration was appropriate and what was considered presumptuous. Both the explicit and the implicit messages arrived during the period of maximum receptivity and were absorbed as foundational specifications rather than as optional opinions to be evaluated. The upper limiting problem, described by Gay Hendricks in his book, The Big Leap, is the specific mechanism through which the self-concept's specifications are maintained against the pressure of outer success. Hendricks observed across his clinical work that people consistently self-sabotage at the specific threshold where their outer success would exceed the inner specification of what they are allowed to have. The business that succeeds and then encounters the inexplicable strategic error, the relationship that deepens into genuine intimacy and then encounters the inexplicable argument that creates necessary distance, the financial situation that improves and then encounters the inexplicable expense. These patterns are not random misfortune. They are the upper limit of the self-concept, being maintained by the subconscious, with the same faithfulness it maintains every other correspondence between inner specification and outer experience. Revising the self-concept requires working at the level where the self-concept actually operates, which is the subconscious programming level, rather than at the level of conscious positive thinking that overlies the unchanged programming without reaching it. The specific approach, most effective for self-concept revision, combines genuine insight into the current self-concept's content, emotional processing of the specific experiences that installed the limiting specifications, and consistent, deliberate practice of new self-concept content, delivered through the high receptivity windows with genuine felt quality. Each of these elements is necessary. The insight without the emotional processing produces intellectual understanding without lasting change. The emotional processing without the consistent new programming produces catharsis without new direction. And the consistent new programming without the insight and emotional processing produces the specific hollowness of affirmations overlying unaddressed painful material. The specific new self-concept content most effective for genuine revision is formulated in present tense identity language that describes the direction of movement with genuine plausibility, rather than claiming an arrived state that the current subconscious will reject as obviously false. The transition from the self-concept of someone who always struggles financially to the self-concept of someone for whom financial abundance is simply normal may require intermediate steps. Someone who is developing increasing clarity and skill around money. Someone who understands money more genuinely and uses it more effectively with every passing month. Someone whose relationship with financial abundance is becoming progressively more natural and more genuine. These intermediate formulations are genuinely directional, genuinely plausible to the current subconscious state, and genuinely capable of generating the new programming from which the next step's formulation becomes accessible. The divine spark within you has been present through every version of the self-concept you have ever held. It was present in the child who absorbed the limiting specifications of the early environment. It was present in the adolescent who tried to build a life from those specifications. It was present in the adult who has been applying genuine effort toward outcomes that the blueprint keeps preventing. And it is present now, in this moment of genuine inquiry, as the awareness that is recognizing the blueprint as a blueprint rather than as fixed reality, and beginning to understand what genuine revision requires and what it makes possible. The spark is not diminished by the blueprint that has been covering it. It has simply been waiting for this moment of recognition, which is the specific moment from which genuine, lasting self-concept revision most naturally and most powerfully begins. The life available from a genuinely revised self-concept is not a life exempt from difficulty or challenge. It is a life met from a genuinely different inner position, one in which the challenges that arise are encountered by someone who fundamentally knows their own worth, who does not need external confirmation of their competence to maintain genuine inner stability, and who relates to setbacks as information relevant to the ongoing creative process, rather than as verdicts on their fundamental adequacy. This quality of meeting life from genuine inner security is what the revised self-concept makes possible, and it is qualitatively different from any outer achievement that the old blueprint could produce, regardless of how much effort was applied in its pursuit. Chapter 8. The imagination that creates before experience. Does everything that exists in the human world existed first in someone's imagination? Not in the weak, escapist sense that dismisses imagination as fantasy, disconnected from real life. In the specific, generative sense that every structure ever built, every social institution ever established, every relationship ever cultivated, and every achievement ever accomplished began as an inner picture held by someone who had not yet seen it in physical form. The imagination is not the place where you go when you cannot have the real thing. The imagination is the specific faculty through which the real thing first takes shape before it appears in the world. Neville Goddard, whose practical teachings on the imagination form one of the cornerstones of this audiobook, stated this directly. Imagining creates reality. Not imagining as idle fantasy, but imagining in the specific sense of genuinely, vividly, feelingly inhabiting the desired state as if it were already real. The neuroscientific research on mental imagery and its effects provides the specific biological mechanism through which genuine imagination affects the brain and body in ways that produce lasting change rather than simply pleasant experience. When a person vividly imagines a specific experience with genuine sensory and emotional richness, the same neural circuits activate as would activate during the actual physical experience of that scenario. Research on mental rehearsal in athletic performance has demonstrated this with particular precision. Athletes who practice mental rehearsal of specific skills show measurable improvement in the actual physical performance of those skills, because the neural pathways governing the skill have been genuinely strengthened through the mental practice. The brain does not clearly distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a genuinely occurring one. This is not a limitation, but an extraordinary creative opportunity. Goddard's specific technique for genuinely effective imagination practice involves three distinct elements that together produce the specific quality of inner experience that generates lasting subconscious impression. The first is the specific scene, rather than vaguely imagining being successful or being happy. The practice requires choosing a specific, concrete scene that would naturally occur if the desired outcome had already been achieved. The second is the inside perspective. The scene is inhabited from within, seeing what would be seen, hearing what would be heard, and most importantly, feeling what would be felt from inside the experience, rather than observed from the outside, as a mental movie of yourself having the experience. The third is the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the specific, genuine, present moment emotional quality of someone for whom the desired state is simply the current obvious reality, rather than a hoped-for future outcome. The feeling is the most consequential of these three elements and the most difficult to genuinely access, which is precisely why it is the most important to understand and develop. Most people, when they attempt visualization practice, generate a cognitive image of a desired outcome without genuinely inhabiting the emotional body state of someone for whom that outcome is already real. The image without the feeling is the equivalent of describing a meal without tasting it. It carries information but not the specific sensory emotional reality that produces genuine subconscious impression. The feeling with the image, however brief and however imperfect in its initial cultivation, carries the specific combination that the subconscious receives as genuine experience and encodes as genuine programming. Accessing the feeling of the wish fulfilled, as Goddard called it, requires the specific practice of emotional recall and emotional transfer. The person who cannot immediately access the genuine felt experience of, say, genuine financial ease, can begin by accessing the genuine felt experience of something else that is genuinely known and genuinely felt. The specific warmth of a cherished relationship, the specific satisfaction of a genuinely accomplished task, the specific expansiveness of a genuinely beautiful, natural environment. This genuine felt quality, accessed through real memory and real feeling, can then be deliberately extended into the imagined scene of the desired outcome. The subconscious receives the genuine emotional quality, regardless of which specific content it was originally associated with, and the transfer of that genuine quality into the desired scene gives the imagination practice the specific emotional authenticity that produces genuine programming impact. The timing of imagination practice within the daily cycle is as significant as its content and method. The specific brainwave state of the transition between sleep and waking, when the brain passes through theta on its way into and out of sleep, provides the specific neurological condition in which imagination practice produces maximum subconscious impression. Goddard specifically recommended what he called the state akin to sleep, the specific state of deep physical relaxation, combined with enough waking awareness to maintain deliberate direction of the imagination, as the ideal condition for the most effective imagination practice. In this state, the critical, evaluating function of the ordinary waking mind is partially suspended, and the vividly imagined, genuinely felt inner scene reaches the subconscious with the directness and the depth that produces lasting programming change rather than pleasant but ephemeral cognitive experience. The consistency of imagination practice is more important than the perfection of any single session. The subconscious is not changed by dramatic single experiences in the way it is changed by consistent, repeated, genuinely felt impressions accumulated across time. A 5-minute session of genuinely engaged imagination practice, conducted daily across several months, produces more lasting subconscious impression than a single hour of the most vivid visualization practice ever conducted, if that single session is not followed by consistent practice across time. The analogy to physical training is precise. A single intense workout does not produce the sustained physical change that consistent moderate daily training produces across months. The subconscious, like the body, responds to the accumulated weight of consistent, genuine practice, rather than to the intensity of occasional heroic effort. The imagination, fully understood and skillfully applied through the specific practices this chapter describes, is not a supplement to genuine practical engagement with the world. It is the specific faculty through which the inner picture that precedes every outer reality is first created with sufficient clarity and sufficient genuine felt quality to generate the subconscious programming from which the corresponding outer reality most naturally and most inevitably emerges. The divine spark within you is the creative intelligence that animates this faculty. Learning to use the imagination deliberately with the genuine quality of inner engagement this chapter describes is learning to work consciously with the specific creative power that has always been your most fundamental nature. Chapter 9. Faith, the substance of what has not yet appeared. The letter to the Hebrews in the Christian scripture contains one of the most precise and most practical definitions of faith available in any text. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Most people read this as a description of religious belief, of trusting in divine promises that cannot be verified through ordinary experience. But read through the lens of the practical metaphysics this audiobook explores. This definition describes something considerably more specific and considerably more practically actionable. Faith, in this understanding, is not belief in the absence of evidence. It is the specific inner condition in which the desired outcome is genuinely present as a felt reality before it has appeared in physical form. Faith, understood this way, is not a psychological comfort. It is the specific creative mechanism through which the inner reality precedes and generates the outer one. The distinction between genuine faith and wishful thinking is the distinction between a state genuinely inhabited in the body and a state cognitively performed from outside. Wishful thinking holds the desired outcome at arm's length, as something you hope might happen, something you are trying to believe in, something you would very much like to be true. The emotional quality of wishful thinking is the emotional quality of wanting something not yet present, of the gap between where you are and where you desire to be. This emotional quality, delivered consistently to the subconscious, programs the subconscious with the content of the gap rather than the content of the desired state. Genuine faith inhabits the desired state directly, as if it were already and obviously real. The emotional quality of genuine faith is the emotional quality of already having, of the settled confidence of someone who is not hoping for something to arrive, but recognizing something that is already real. The practical cultivation of genuine faith begins with the specific recognition that the inner creative process described throughout this audiobook is real, that its mechanisms are genuine, and that consistent, genuine inner work in the direction of a specific desired outcome will produce that outcome through the specific mechanisms of subconscious reprogramming, perceptual shift, behavioral change, and electromagnetic broadcast described in earlier chapters. This is not faith in the supernatural. It is faith in a natural process whose operation is as consistent and as reliable as any other natural process, once the mechanism is genuinely understood and genuinely applied. The person who has genuinely absorbed the understanding this audiobook offers has the specific foundation for this kind of genuine faith. The understanding of the process on which the faith is grounded. The relationship between faith and doubt is one of the most practically important dimensions of this teaching, and one that deserves honest examination rather than the kind of forced positivity that refuses to acknowledge doubt's existence. Doubt is the presence of an established subconscious program that contradicts the desired outcome. It is not evidence that the desired outcome is genuinely unavailable. It is evidence that a contrary program is currently established at the subconscious level and is generating its characteristic inner experience of uncertainty. Understanding doubt as program output rather than as honest assessment changes the relationship to it. The doubt is not telling you the truth about what is possible. It is telling you what the current program specifies as probable, which is a very different thing. Meeting doubt skillfully requires neither suppressing it nor engaging it as if it were accurate assessment of genuine limitation. The most effective approach is the specific practice of acknowledging its presence, recognizing it as the output of an established contrary program, and then returning attention with deliberate, genuine felt engagement to the desired state rather than remaining in the inner argument that doubt invites. This returning is not a denial of the doubt's existence. It is a deliberate act of redirecting the creative energy away from the unwanted direction toward the desired one. Understanding that the direction in which creative energy is consistently directed is the direction in which the subconscious builds. The doubt does not disappear immediately. It loses its dominance gradually as the consistent practice of returning to genuine faith accumulates the specific subconscious impression that eventually makes faith the more established program, and doubt the occasional visitor rather than the perpetual resident. The patience required for genuine faith is the patience of understanding a process rather than the patience of hoping something might happen. The gardener who genuinely understands how plants grow does not dig up the seeds to check whether they are sprouting. They water consistently, provide what the growth process requires, and trust the process with the specific confidence of genuine understanding, rather than the anxious monitoring of someone who does not know whether what they are doing is working. The faith this audiobook teaches is the faith of the gardener who understands the process, patient, consistent, genuinely engaged with the specific practices that support the growth, and genuinely trusting the process with the specific confidence of someone who understands what the process is and how it operates. The outer evidence of genuine faith developing is not primarily the appearance of the desired outer outcomes, though those do eventually appear as the inner work reaches sufficient depth. The outer evidence of genuine faith developing is the specific quality of inner experience that changes as genuine faith becomes more established. The decreasing urgency of the wanting that was organized around the gap, the decreasing anxiety of the monitoring that was checking whether the process was working, and the increasing quality of genuine settled confidence in both the direction and the process. These inner changes are the specific evidence that the subconscious is genuinely revising, that the faith is becoming genuinely established, rather than remaining a performance of positivity on top of unchanged contrary programming. They typically precede the outer manifestations by days, weeks, or months, depending on the depth of the contrary programs being revised. The divine spark within you is the specific ground of genuine faith. It is the awareness that is present through every phase of the inner work, witnessing the doubt and the faith alike from a position that is not threatened by either. When you rest in that witnessing awareness, even briefly, the doubt loses its authority because you recognize that the doubting is an activity within awareness rather than a verdict from awareness, and the faith deepens because you recognize that the creative power this audiobook describes is not something you are trying to acquire from outside yourself, but something you are learning to recognize as your own most genuine nature. From that recognition, faith is not an effort. It is a homecoming. Chapter 10. The language that builds your world. In the beginning was the Word. This opening of the Gospel of John is not simply a theological claim about cosmology. It is a precise description of the creative sequence through which all human reality is constructed. First, the Word, then the world built from it. And language is not a neutral tool for describing a reality that exists independently of it. Language actively constructs the reality it appears to describe through the specific mechanism of the words we use to narrate our experience to ourselves and to others, becoming the subconscious programming from which future experience is generated. This is the specific understanding that Florence Scovel Shinn's practical teachings explored with unusual directness. Your word is your wand. What you speak habitually, with genuine emotional engagement, you are building. The construction happens below conscious awareness, but the materials are the specific words you are consistently providing. The inner monologue, the continuous stream of self-talk that most people never directly examine, is the most continuously active and the most consistently influential source of subconscious programming in any adult life. It operates from the moment of waking until the moment of sleeping, delivering programming content with the specific emotional authenticity that habitual speech naturally carries. The habitual phrase that describes the financial situation in the language of chronic insufficiency is delivering genuine financial programming every time it appears with genuine felt quality. The habitual phrase that describes the relational situation in the language of chronic difficulty is delivering genuine relational programming. The habitual phrase that describes the self in the language of limitation is delivering genuine identity programming. None of this is neutral description. All of it is active construction. Conducting an honest inventory of the inner monologue requires the specific practice of deliberate, non-judgmental self-observation across an ordinary day, attending to the habitual language patterns that arise automatically in different categories of situation. What does the inner voice say when encountering financial challenges? What language does it use when reflecting on relational history? What phrases arise automatically when evaluating professional performance? What is the characteristic tone of the inner voice across ordinary daily experience? The tone of someone navigating a hostile world from a position of chronic insufficiency, or the tone of someone engaged with a responsive world from a position of genuine creative capacity. The honest answers to these questions reveal the specific programming currently being delivered, and the specific programming currently being delivered is the specific map of what most needs deliberate revision. The practical work of linguistic revision does not require monitoring every thought or effortfully controlling every utterance. It requires the specific cultivation of awareness of the habitual patterns and the consistent, compassionate, undramatic practice of choosing different language when the awareness is present. The old pattern will arise frequently, especially in the early period of the practice, because habitual language patterns are deeply grooved through years of consistent repetition. Meeting the old pattern with self-judgment makes the practice more difficult. By adding the specific emotional charge of shame to the programming content, which the subconscious receives along with the linguistic content. Meeting the old pattern with simple noticing, followed by the simple choice of a more generative alternative when possible, builds the new groove without the additional complication of shame's programming impact. The specific quality of language most effective for genuine subconscious reprogramming has several distinguishing characteristics. Present tense construction is the first. The language of what is genuinely in motion now, rather than what might eventually arrive. I am developing an increasingly genuine and authentic relationship with financial ease is more effective as subconscious programming than I will be financially secure someday. Because the present tense construction specifies a current reality that the subconscious organizes around, rather than a future possibility that specifies a current absence. Identity-level language is the second. The language of who you are, rather than what you are doing, or what you hope to achieve. I am someone who navigates professional challenges with increasing skill and increasing confidence programs, the identity at the foundational level from which all behavior naturally arises. The relationship between the words spoken externally in conversation with other people and the subconscious programming they generate is one of the most consistently overlooked dimensions of the linguistic dimension of inner work. Most people understand, at least in principle, that internal language shapes internal experience. Fewer people recognize that the language spoken externally about themselves, particularly in the emotionally charged context of genuine social interaction with people who matter, generates subconscious programming through the specific mechanism of the speaker hearing themselves make these statements in the context of genuine social, emotional engagement. The conversation in which you describe your financial difficulty in the language of permanent identity, validated by the sympathetic response of someone whose opinion genuinely matters to you, is one of the most deeply programming linguistic events available in ordinary life. The practice of deliberate affirmation, applied with the specific qualities of genuine present tense identity language, genuine felt engagement rather than cognitive performance, and consistent delivery during the high receptivity windows of the daily cycle, is the concentrated, deliberate version of the ongoing linguistic practice that the complete work of this audiobook extends across the full texture of daily experience. The affirmation session is the focused investment. The ongoing linguistic awareness across the ordinary day is the maintenance of the new direction against the pull of old habitual language patterns. Together they constitute the complete linguistic dimension of the inner work, and together they produce the specific accumulated subconscious programming shift, from which the corresponding shift in experienced outer reality eventually and inevitably emerges. The world you are building with your language right now is not a separate project from the world you are physically inhabiting. It is the blueprint of the world you will be physically inhabiting in the months and years ahead. Every consistent, genuinely felt linguistic pattern you maintain is a specification in that blueprint. The question is not whether you are building. The question is whether the building currently underway corresponds to the life you genuinely want to live. If it does not, the most direct available path to changing what is being built is changing what language is providing the specifications. And the most direct available path to changing the language is the specific honest awareness and the specific patient practice that this chapter and this audiobook have been describing. Chapter 11, Awakening in Ordinary Life. The awakening described in spiritual traditions has been so thoroughly associated with dramatic, extraordinary experiences, with visions, with sudden illuminations, with the specific quality of transformation that appears to happen in an instant and leave everything permanently changed, that many people have come to believe genuine awakening is either something that happens to a very few specially gifted people or something that requires years in a monastery before it becomes available. Both assumptions are false, and they are harmful in the specific way that false assumptions about what is required always harm. They discourage genuine engagement with the specific practices that are genuinely accessible by creating the impression that those practices are merely preliminary to a real awakening that remains perpetually out of reach. The genuine awakening described in this audiobook is not a single dramatic event. It is a gradually deepening quality of genuine presence, genuine self-awareness, and genuine creative engagement with ordinary daily life that develops through consistent practice, and that changes the quality of ordinary experience from within rather than from above. The contemplative traditions that have most honestly described the practical path of genuine awakening consistently emphasize the ordinariness of the awakened life rather than its extraordinary qualities. Zen stories frequently describe the awakened person as someone who chops wood and carries water, the same activities everyone performs, but with a fundamentally different quality of presence and a fundamentally different relationship to the experience of doing them. The Sufi tradition describes the mature mystic not as someone who has escaped ordinary life, but as someone fully present in it, with a heart simultaneously engaged with the world and resting in the awareness that underlies all worldly engagement. The Christian contemplative tradition speaks of practicing the presence of God in the midst of ordinary activities, rather than reserved for specific devotional periods. The common thread is that the awakening genuinely integrates with ordinary life, rather than requiring escape from it. The specific quality of awakened presence available within ordinary daily life is most directly accessed through what contemporary mindfulness traditions call present moment awareness, and what the older contemplative traditions called recollection, the deliberate returning of attention to the immediate experience of now, rather than the habitual drift into mental rehearsal of past grievance or future anxiety. This quality of presence is not a state achieved once and maintained automatically. It is a capacity that develops through consistent practice, through the patient accumulation of genuinely present moments across the ordinary hours of ordinary days. Each return to genuine presence a small exercise of the awareness capacity that gradually becomes more naturally available as it is more consistently exercised. The relationship between genuine present moment awareness and the subconscious reprogramming work described in earlier chapters is one of mutual support rather than competition. Present moment awareness provides the specific quality of witnessing consciousness from which the subconscious programs become visible as programs rather than remaining invisible as simply the truth of how things are. From within the habitual identification with the program's content, the financial scarcity narrative is not experienced as a narrative. It is experienced as the obvious, accurate description of current financial reality. From within genuine, present moment awareness, the same narrative is experienced as a specific inner event, a thought arising within awareness, which can be noticed, recognized as program output, and met with the conscious choice of a different response rather than the automatic acceptance and elaboration of the programmed one. Intentional living, which is the specific practice of bringing deliberate conscious awareness to the quality of inner experience across the ordinary activities of the day, is the advanced stage of the inner development work that all the preceding chapters have been building toward. The formal practices of visualization, affirmation, heart coherence cultivation, and specific high receptivity window work are the concentrated investments that build the inner capacities. Intentional living is what deploys those capacities continuously in the actual texture of actual daily life, converting the inner capacities from qualities possessed in a practice context into qualities expressed across the full breadth of a genuinely lived life. This conversion is the specific transformation from a person who has a spiritual practice to a person who is living a spiritually awake life. And it is the most comprehensive and the most lasting form of transformation available. The divine spark, the awareness that is your deepest nature, does not need to be created or imported or achieved through any external means. It simply needs to be increasingly recognized and increasingly allowed to express itself through the ordinary activities of the ordinary day. Each moment of genuine presence is a moment of that recognition. Each moment of genuine creative engagement with whatever the current activity demands is an expression of that recognition. Each moment of meeting the inner critic, the habitual negativity, the chronic anxiety, with the quality of spacious, non-defensive awareness, rather than the quality of contracted identification, is a moment in which the spark burns a little more clearly through the constructions that have been partially obscuring it. The specific practices that most effectively cultivate awakening in ordinary life share several common features. They are brief enough to be integrated into the ordinary structure of daily activity without requiring significant dedicated time. They are simple enough to be accessible in the midst of ordinary complexity, and they are immediately connected to the genuine quality of present moment experience, rather than requiring the achievement of any special state as a prerequisite. The deliberate breath taken before a challenging conversation, attended to with genuine present moment awareness rather than treated as merely preparatory activity, is a genuine practice of awakening. The genuine noticing of what is genuinely beautiful in the immediate environment, held for a moment of real appreciation, rather than registered and immediately dismissed in the rush of the ordinary day, is a genuine practice of awakening. These are not substitutes for more intensive formal practice. They are the integration of that practice into the living of a genuine life. Awakening in ordinary life does not produce a person who is perpetually serene, perpetually cheerful, or perpetually free from genuine difficulty. It produces a person who meets the inevitable, serene, and cheerful moments with genuine presence rather than taking them for granted, who meets the inevitable difficulties with genuine inner resource rather than being collapsed by them, and who maintains access to the specific quality of creative intelligence and creative freedom that genuine present moment awareness makes available across all the varieties of experience that constitute an ordinary human life, genuinely and fully lived. This is the specific quality of life that the divine spark, gradually recognized and gradually more fully expressed through consistent practice, ultimately makes possible. Chapter 12. The life that has always been waiting for you. There is a life that has been waiting for you. Not waiting in the sense of a predetermined destiny that will arrive regardless of anything you do. Waiting in the more genuine and more interesting sense of a specific quality of life that has always been available from the resources already within you, from the specific intelligence, the specific creative capacity, and the specific quality of awareness that are your most fundamental nature, but that the accumulated constructions of the inner architecture have been partially obscuring. This life is not extraordinary in the sense of being available only to special people with special gifts or special circumstances. It is extraordinary in the sense of being the specific life available to any person who has genuinely done the work of recognizing and revising what has been obscuring their own genuine nature and their own genuine capacity. That work is exactly what this audiobook has been describing and building across its 12 chapters. The financial dimension of the life that has been waiting for you is not characterized by any specific income number or any specific accumulation of material wealth. It is characterized by a specific quality of genuine ease in navigating the financial dimension of life, which arises not from the absence of financial challenge, but from meeting financial challenge from a position of genuine inner resource rather than chronic inner anxiety. The person who has genuinely revised their financial subconscious program approaches financial opportunity with the specific quality of confidence that generates different responses from the financial environment. They make financial decisions with a specific quality of clarity that comes from a mind not clouded by chronic scarcity thinking. They relate to money as a medium of genuine exchange and genuine contribution, rather than as a source of chronic threat. This quality of relationship with money, built from the inside out through genuine inner work, generates financial experience that corresponds to it with the faithfulness the law of correspondence has always maintained. The relational dimension of the life waiting for you is the specific quality of connection available when you approach other people from genuine inner security, rather than from this chronic defensive anxiety of someone whose inner program specifies that genuine connection is uncertain and probably temporary. The person who has genuinely revised their relational self-concept relates to others with a specific quality of genuine interest and genuine availability that generates genuine reciprocity, rather than the specific guardedness that the fear-organized inner posture tends to elicit. They inhabit their relationships with the specific quality of genuine vulnerability that makes deep mutual knowing possible, rather than the managed performance of connection that keeps both people at a safe but ultimately unsatisfying distance. The relational life available from genuine inner security is not perfect. It contains genuine difficulty, genuine misunderstanding, and genuine loss. But it contains them within a context of genuine connection that makes them navigable rather than devastating. The creative and professional dimension of the life waiting for you is where some of the most personally meaningful and practically significant transformations tend to become visible as genuine inner work accumulates across time. The ceiling that was specified by the old self-concept, the specific level of recognition, responsibility, and contribution above which the subconscious consistently generated the upper limiting behavior that maintained the familiar level, begins to lift as the self-concept genuinely revises. Work that was approached from the chronic anxiety of someone who was not entirely sure they deserved to be doing it begins to be approached from the genuine confidence of someone who knows what they bring and trusts it. Creative expression that was held back by the specific fear of judgment begins to be offered with the genuine openness of someone whose identity does not depend on universal approval for its stability. The spiritual dimension of the life waiting for you is the specific quality of inner life available to someone who has recognized their own awareness as their most fundamental nature, who lives with the ongoing recognition that the witness of all their experience is not threatened by any content of that experience, and who brings this quality of genuine inner spaciousness to every encounter, with every circumstance the ordinary day provides. This is not the spiritual dimension of having arrived at a state of permanent enlightenment that the great teachers describe as the end point of a lifetime of genuine practice. It is the more modest and more immediately accessible spiritual dimension of someone who has genuinely begun the recognition, who lives with it increasingly rather than occasionally, and who finds that this genuine beginning changes the quality of every ordinary moment in which it is present. The complete daily practice that maintains and deepens the life described in this chapter integrates the specific practices developed across all the preceding chapters into a coherent, sustainable, genuinely livable daily structure. The morning transition is used deliberately for the specific work of heart coherence cultivation, genuine gratitude practice, identity level affirmation, and the specific imagination practice of genuinely inhabiting the desired state in the high receptivity window. The active hours are engaged with the ongoing linguistic awareness, the deliberate present moment returns, and the specific practice of meeting each arising of the old programs with the compassionate, non-identified witnessing that gradually reduces their automatic dominance. The evening transition is used for the specific consolidation practice of briefly acknowledging genuine movement in the desired direction and then setting the specific inner content that the subconscious will process during the night. The life waiting for you is not something you need to achieve. It is something you need to uncover. The divine spark that is your most fundamental nature does not need to be imported, earned, or created through any external means. It simply needs the specific accumulated weight of genuine inner work to gradually remove what has been obscuring it, allowing it to express itself with increasing clarity, increasing confidence, and increasing creative power through the specific life you are here to live. Every chapter of this audiobook has been a different angle on the same essential work. Every practice described has been a different tool for the same essential uncovering. And every moment of genuine engagement you have brought to these teachings has been a genuine step in the direction of the life that has always been available from within your own most genuine nature. You did not find this audiobook. This audiobook found you in the specific moment. Your readiness and this specific collection of ideas finally met. That meeting was not random. It was the specific convergence of an inner preparation that has been underway longer than this audiobook, and a set of teachings that have been waiting to meet exactly the quality of readiness you brought. What begins from this meeting is not the audiobook ending. It is the genuine work beginning. The genuine work of daily practice, of patient, consistent application of the understanding these chapters have offered, of the gradual, deepening, increasingly lived recognition of the divine spark within you as your own most genuine nature expressing itself through the specific, irreplaceable, genuinely extraordinary, ordinary life that is yours and only yours to live.